if you are in a state where the politics is more hierarchical or a more well-defined political sharing formula, or a more defined political formula for rotating power, those generally tend to see lower turnout because many voters just think it's a given that whichever part of that state, right, has picked their leader will eventually get into office, and so there's no point voting. But in states where politics is typically more competitive, and unfortunately, in the Nigerian context, typically more violent, you tend to see turnout.
Hello. Okay, I think we're having some glitches here with your calls. Okay, but we got that point there. It was towards the end that we couldn't get it. But now I want to ask, so with voter apathy across states, is it peculiar to state elections that happen after the presidential elections, or do we see off-cycle elections record voter apathy across states as well? For example, Osun, Edo, Kogi, for example, say Kogi, and yes, Kogi will be having the elections later in the year. Imo State as well has joined the off-cycle team. We'll be having the elections later in the year. And now, for off-cycle elections in states, do we see voter apathy or this low turnout as against elections that happen immediately after the presidential elections?
I think it's generally both. Off-cycle elections tend to suffer from one key thing, which is that national focus that you generally see, when that national mood for electing leaders, for voting, that would generally lead to a bump in interest. You generally don't see that elections because typically states are, an individual state, right, is just voting at any given time. And the way we've structured our off-cycle elections, right, is such that even if you have multiple state governorship elections in a year, they are typically not scheduled at the same time. So because we practice this, turn by turn, one state at a time, off-cycle model, and we don't bundle them up together, again, it's a bit harder to generate that anticipation that focuses resources, that also focuses the interest of voters in terms of what's happening in those states. And that could account for why, overall voter interest is typically low, and then turnout is generally, and turnout also follows and tracks similarly. Also, because again, almost all politics is local, right? And many Nigerians are not familiar with all of the internal political dynamics that play in every state. And so if your state is not voting, or if you're not a voter and there isn't an election, right, there is you would need to be very, very familiar with the political structure and the political framework and the political dynamics that play in that state for you to be interested. If you're not, it's a lot easier for you to tune out. But we have a situation like we have today where 28 states are picking their governors at the same time. How voter interest to be maintained typically happens in two main ways. One, we know that generally speaking, the same political parties are fielding candidates across all of those states. So national frame of mind, right, that the average voter is in. So even if you're a voter, say in Lagos, and you don't really understand the politics in Nasarawa or in Plateau, or in Akwa Ibom, or in Sokoto. But you know that the same political parties are fielding governorship and state, state houses of assembly candidates in all of those states. It's easier for you to benchmark because you're personally invested as a voter in Lagos in how your chosen party or the party that you have the most sympathies for is doing. It's easier for you to then benchmark, not only in terms of we potentially be doing in other parts of the country, even if you don't really know the candidates, right, that the party is, you're not very familiar with the politics of those states. In an off-cycle election, especially if you're staying in a state that isn't, electing a governor when the rest of the country isn't, is a lot harder to maintain that kind of interest.
All right. So, also, there's been this school of thought, and now this is our final question. Now, there's been a school of thought that just maybe if we move